From ghoulies and ghosties.
From ghoulies and ghosties.
And long-leggedy beasties.
And long-leggedy beasties.
And
things that go bump in the night. Good Lord! Deliver us.
Deliver us.
Ladies and gentlemen, from Pennsylvania, the master of ceremonies, Count Drahoon. Hello there, spooks and spookettes. CountDrahoon here, and tonight I present to you a dilemma. I need your help. I can't decide which is my favorite movie of 2024 so far. Won't you help me out? Thank you in advance for watching this evening. I hope you will subscribe to CountDrahoon Presents so that you can get notifications for my next video. Your Count has seen a lot of movies at the theater this year. I'm proud to say that I have surpassed my record from last year and have seen roughly 43 new releases at the time of this recording. Most of them were meh. Some were really bad. But the best, the top 3 of 2024 so far, can be boiled down to 2 horror films that I saw and 1 comedy. One of them was a surprise hit for me over the summer, written and directed by J.T. Mulner, Strange Darling. The other, a body horror science fiction satire starring legendary actress Demi Moore and newcomer Margaret Qualley, The Substance. The third film may come as a surprise to you, spooks and spookettes. It's a straight-up slapstick comedy dubbed the greatest Wisconsinite film of all time. I am talking of the indie sensation, Hundreds of Beavers. Let's get right into the heart of the matter, and hopefully you won't feel the need to drive a stake through it. I'm going to break down my review like a sandwich. It's my lunch break. The first part, I'll talk about horror film. The second part, I'll go ahead and let you know that I will be reviewing Hundreds of Beavers, and then I will conclude with the other horror film. So the first layer, we shall talk about Strange Darling.
I want something intimate, something romantic.
Warning, there will be spoilers. Strange Darling has a fairly simple plot, or at least that's what we're led to believe. It opens up on a rather intense chase scene between the demon, played by Kyle Gallner, and the lady, played by Rilla Fitzgerald. We as the audience are led to believe that the demon is in fact a serial killer. The lady is his prey that he is stalking and seems to not stop at anything to get her, whether that's firing off some rounds from a sawed-off shotgun, trying to run her down in a big truck, or even killing the hippie couple, played by legendary actors Ed Begley Jr. and Barbara Hershey, who are simply enjoying their brunch until the lady stumbled into their house begging for help. That's what we think at first. The movie is told in 6 chapters. None of the chapters are in chronological order. The 2 actually met the night before in oh boy, what's the best way to say this? So the G-rated way of saying it would be a blind date, but the more mature way, they met at a one-night stand. They were trying to get up all in that, as the kids say. Their encounter seemed pretty violent at first, but then we learn that they're just they like the rough stuff. I don't actually like talking about any of this stuff, and I do apologize for the awkwardness, but it is an important plot point, because around the middle of the movie, we get a total shift. The serial killer that the locals have dubbed the Blue Neon Killer is not the demon, but the lady. The demon is actually a cop, and that's why he's pursuing her. He's trying to subdue his suspect. And he does end up capturing her and holding her briefly. Alas, she is just too clever. She slips out of her handcuffs and ends up killing the demon, but not before he is able to make a call for backup. 2 police officers arrive on the scene, 1 female officer and 1 male. The female officer believes that the lady is the victim in this situation, but the male officer is a little skeptical. So they put her in the back of their police car and they drive from the scene of the crime, only to be stopped and overcome by the lady. The lady lets the female officer go, leaving her down the road, but she makes the male officer drive her a little bit farther down the road, where she actually ends up killing him and abandoning the car altogether. She starts wandering down this road in the middle of the wilderness, where she's picked up by an unwitting female driver. She gets in the car, they drive a little bit down the road, and that's when the lady sees the face of a demon in the female driver. See, that's why our demon is referred to as a demon. That's her whole MO, is that the reason why she kills people is because she sees the faces of evil spirits in the victims that she kills. So she sees the evil spirit in this unwitting female driver, but the driver is able to draw her gun and shoot the lady in self-defense. The lady is still alive, but she's dying a very slow and agonizingly painful death. As she dies, the screen fades to black and white, and subsequently fades to black to end Strange Darling. The film was written and directed by J.T. Mulner, who insisted that this film be shot on 35mm film, which is completely unheard of nowadays. Speaking of film, the movie's director of photography was Giovanni Ribisi, the actor. I have to say, I think Ribisi may have missed his calling in life. He is every bit as talented behind the camera as he is in front of the camera. This movie is perhaps the most gorgeously shot film of 2024. The cinematography and the editing work hand in hand to create this beautiful palette of colors that really pop off the screen. And you know, I hate to borrow the analysis of other YouTubers, but I heard this comment that I feel like summed up the cast rather perfectly. When you film on 35mm film, 16mm, what have you, you do sort of create this limited resource as opposed to digital, because with digital you can just film multiple takes a day, however long you need to, but with film you're very set on the amount of takes you can actually make on a film camera. And I believe that that scarcity, if you want to call it that, really made the cast step up and bring their A game in every single take of this movie. That's why I feel like the performances in this movie are just so top-notch. It's because they had to make it top-notch, because they they were burning film, and film is very, very expensive, and it's also a tedious process, because you have to shoot on it, and you have to send it off and get it developed, then you have to look at it, make sure the shots are well, and then anyway, I digress. That, with a good story, a great script, every scene, every line of dialogue was just so memorable. It was quite the journey to go on. And yes, from a story structure perspective, I will admit that the shift midway in the movie, where we figure out that the lady is in fact the killer, it was a bit predictable. Personally, I didn't mind. I felt like it was earned. I really appreciate filmmakers like J.T. Mulner, who are trying to tell their own stories in their own way, as opposed to everything we see from Hollywood in terms of this weird fixation on reboots and remakes. This one is a complete change of pace. I normally don't talk about non-horror or non-monster movies here on this channel, but today I'm very happy to make this exception. But in the case of Hundreds of Beavers, maybe you could make the argument that the beavers are in fact the monsters. The film takes place during the 1800s, during the frontier days. Our protagonist is an applejack by the name of Jean Kayak, played by Ryland Brixton Coltuse. Yes, that is his real name. It is one person. I checked. Kayak operates his apple orchards and distillery in the wilds of Wisconsin, and he breaks the golden rule from Scarface, which is to say that you are not supposed to get high off of your own supply, or in this case, drunk. And he has a rip-roaring of good time. While in his drunken stupor, he inadvertently burns down his orchards, and a band of mischievous beavers chew down his wooden containers. Well, there's got to be a better word for that. What's the collective noun for beavers? Ah! Colony. A colony of beavers. I like that a lot better. While recovering from his bender, he realizes that he has lost everything. He does his best to survive the cold, cruel Wisconsinite winter, but to no avail. He meets some interesting characters along the way, including the Indian fur trapper played by Luis Rico, and his trusty companion, portrayed by Brendan Steer. He has to be the most important character in this entire film. Well, anyway, eventually he is taken under the wing of the master fur trapper, played by Wes Tank. As he becomes a little bit better at his trade, the master fur trapper is ultimately killed by a pack of wolves. This forces Jean Kayak to hone his craft on his own, and he does improve. Sort of. But what wilderness tale would be complete without some sort of a trading post? This is where Jean Kayak goes to sell his fur. It is run by a surly merchant, played by Doug Mancheski, and his daughter, the furrier, played by Olivia Graves. Jean Kayak meets the furrier and starts to become smitten with her, much to the chagrin of the merchant. She is the motivation for him honing his craft as a fur trapper. The merchant has a standing rule at his trade post. If you are to bring him hundreds of dead beavers for their fur pelts, you win his daughter's hand in marriage. And before you know it, Jean Kayak becomes the Grim Reaper of the entire race of beavers. He kills a whole slew of beaver characters. The rest of the clan must unite in order to defeat their common enemy. It turns out the beavers are as cuddly as they are clever. Or vice versa. A pair of Sherlock Holmes and Watson beavers have been trailing Jean Kayak ever since he began his beaver cleansing campaign. Kayak finds the massive dam that beavers have been working on, using the materials left over from his cider containers. It turns out it's not actually a dam, but a rocket ship. He is caught by the beavers and essentially put on trial in a sort of kangaroo court, or a beaver court, or a rodent court, however you want to parse it. He beats up the beavers that are putting him in restraints and knocks one of them so hard into the rocket that it starts to malfunction. The rocket fires into another dam, causing a great flood that would ultimately create Green Bay. Jean Kayak rolls up the hundreds of dead beavers into a massive snowball and heads straight for the trading post to win the hand of the furrier and the affections of the merchant. Ryland Brixton Coltuse and Mike Chislick are the team behind another film called The Lake Michigan Monster, which is a delightful little picture. I love that movie so much, I think I'm gonna have to do a separate review on it for a later video. Chislick co-wrote and directed this one, and he also did the editing, just like he did for Lake Michigan Monster. After watching both of these films, I truly believe that these two are God's gift to American cinema. Full stop. The movies they make are just so much fun. I haven't laughed that hard at a film in years. And the most mind-boggling thing about this picture is that it only cost $150,000 to produce. I have a hard time believing it myself. This movie looks like it was made in a fantasy world. The special effects were better than anything I had seen coming out of Hollywood this year. This film should be a case study for all film departments throughout the world on how to utilize a low budget correctly. It feels as if they used the small amount of money they had as an asset rather than as a limitation. They had to make interesting choices, and I think they were spot on. It was a stroke of genius to make the beavers and all of the furry animals as mascots. That's what makes the movie so memorable, not to mention being a huge factor in their successful marketing campaign. If they had made digital animals, we would have been lucky to find this movie at the bottom of a barrel at a Dollar General bin next to the Amazing Bulk. The story is very simplistic, easy to follow despite the lack of dialogue, but there's plenty of good music to go with this one. An overcomplicated plot would have overshadowed the mascot costumes and the cartoony atmosphere. The cast is top-notch. A perfect ensemble comedy troupe that played off of each other very well. If this movie isn't proof enough that Hollywood is creatively bankrupt, I don't know what is. Finally, we come to the bottom layer of this cinematic sandwich. The substance opens up on Elizabeth Sparkle, played by Demi Moore, who has hosted a fitness show that has been the flagship show for her network for many, many years. There is just one problem. Elizabeth is getting older. She has just turned 50. In your Count's humble opinion, I can't really tell that she's showing her age, but the producer, played by Dennis Quaid, disagrees and thinks that a younger actress should take her place. He breaks the news to her over lunch on her birthday. Poor girl. And to make matters worse, she gets in a car accident on her way out of the meeting. Fortunately, she isn't hurt too seriously. Before she is checked out of the hospital, the handsome young male nurse gives her some information on a new potential beauty product called the Substance. The drug is supposed to make a newer, better version of yourself. She is reluctant to try it at first, but after seeing ads for auditions for her old show, she decides to end her wallowing in self-pity and calls the number the nurse gave her. The operator tells her to go to a secret address where she is assigned her own locker. In the locker contains a kit that she's supposed to take home with her and follow the instructions implicitly. It turns out that the newer, better version of you is a literal statement. She injects herself with the drug, and that evening, a new, better version of herself, which will later be called Sue, played by Margaret Qualley, literally springs out of her back. She makes her way out into the world, auditions for Liz's old show, and gets the job. She is getting all kinds of attention from younger men, really all men in general, particularly her producer, who is kind enough to allow her to film 7 days, then take 7 days off, which I'll explain that a little bit more why that's important. The Substance allows Liz to relive the excitement of her youth vicariously through Sue. But of course, there are rules. As I mentioned before, each version of yourself must live for 7 days out in the real world, while the other self lives dormant, safely. Each kit comes with a pack of liquid food for the dormant self to feast on while the other self is living their best life. This is all done in order to achieve perfect balance. As you will see throughout the film, there are terrible consequences when the rules are broken. Sue really enjoys living it up. A lot. While Liz either enjoys wallowing in self-pity in her apartment by herself or is just content and enjoying a casual evening in. It doesn't take long for Sue to become a little selfish and stays just a tad bit longer than the 7 days will allow her to stay out. She wants to stay busy, getting up all in that with some new fellow, while Liz can only seem to pique the interest of a former classmate from the 4th grade. That was the only part of the movie I had a hard time believing. But with each defiance of the rules, it ages Liz just a little bit at first. A finger, maybe a little bit of a wrinkle here and there. But ultimately, it gets far worse, to the point where Liz is unrecognizable and appears to be a haggard old woman. Like, basically looks kinda like a witch. One of those that Angelica Houston played in The Witches. It's rough. Up to this point, Liz and Sue separately have complained to the operator of the substance that the arrangement simply doesn't work. The operator tells Liz that she can stop at any time. But the problem is that any damages incurred up to this point cannot be reversed. So, as the haggard old woman that she has become, she decides to end it. Just as Liz is about to inject Sue with the drug that will put Sue out of her misery, so to speak, Sue wakes up, and a huge fight occurs inside of the apartment, which ends with Liz being killed. Sue thinks that she has won, and that she is free to live her life on her own terms. That's just not how the substance works. Pretty soon, Sue starts to fall apart. Quite literally. And it couldn't have come at a worse time. She is about to go on live for the big New Year's Eve broadcast for her network as the star and host. She decides to hightail it back to the apartment and re-inject herself with the substance. But instead of a newer, better version of Sue, we get this hideous, grotesque monster that seems to be an amalgamation of Sue and Liz and maybe a few other parts. This new creature stumbles its way back into the studio and tries to disguise itself with a funny paper mask of Sue, but eventually the audience catches on and is horrified. The creature begs for the audience not to panic, not to scream, that it's her underneath all of that. Of course, the audience can't understand a single word that she's saying, and neither can we, because I actually have to subtitle the monster at this point. The creature gets her arm cut off, and blood just starts pouring out. I mean, Stanley Kubrick would have been jealous of the amount of blood that was coming her on. It cakes everybody out in the audience, and I'll be honest with you, it did make me very hungry. There wasn't enough popcorn in my bucket to satiate my appetite. But the creature runs out of the studio, and she is pursued by the audience, very reminiscent of the mob from Frankenstein with the pitchforks and torches. The creature makes its way to Hollywood Boulevard, right in front of the star of Elizabeth Sparkle, where the creature implodes, and we see the face of Elizabeth sort of swimming in a pile of gunk that floods right on top of the star of Elizabeth Sparkle, and her face just lights up with joy. She is finally reunited with her old star self. What I found most interesting about this film is that it took several years to make. Production began either right before or during COVID. For obvious reasons, they really didn't finish the film until last year. And right as they were about to release the film, their distributors, Universal Studios, decided not to release the film. Mubi stepped up to the plate and helped the film get a wide release, and the film has actually done pretty well at the box office. This has to be the best work that Demi Moore has ever done. Her acting is superb in this film, and as I hinted before, that woman has aged like a fine wine. Of course, I don't drink wine, but still, she is just as beautiful as she ever was, and it was almost difficult for me to believe that this woman would have been cast aside. And it did take me out of the film for just a moment, but as the film progressed, I started to see what the message of the movie was about, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Margaret Qualley does a great job. What an unhinged turn from Dennis Quaid. I've never seen him act in such a depraved role. He was stupendous. A friend of mine described this movie as the body horror flick that David Cronenberg never made. And I concur 100%. If you love David Cronenberg, you will love The Substance. At press time, this movie has been nominated for a few Golden Globes. I'm pulling for it. I'm also pulling for, hopefully, that it will make the Oscars this year. That will be my favorite, because unfortunately, I just don't see Strange Darling or Hundreds of Beavers making the cut, which is no slight against them, because, well, that's the Academy's problem. It's not theirs. So if I had to say, now going back over in my mind, revisiting these three films, I think in order from third to first, I think The Substance is my number 3. Number 2 is Strange Darling, but it's a very, very close number 2. Very close number 2. And number 1, I think the best movie of the year, hands down, is Hundreds of Beavers. Yeah, just got back from the movies. I saw a few more, including Nosferatu. I do have to adjust my top 5 favorite films of 2024, but top 3 still stand. The Substance number 3, Strange Darling number 2, Hundreds of Beavers is still the best movie of 2024. Although, to be fair, if we want to split the difference, since I am a vampire and this is technically a horror YouTube channel, we'll say that Hundreds of Beavers is the best non-horror film of the year, and Strange Darling is the best horror film of the year. I categorize Strange Darling as a horror film. I know some critics are up in themselves and say that it's not, but well, nobody listens to the critics anyway. To my top 5, I would add that number 4 would be The Wild Robot. It was a really nice animated feature. It was a pleasant surprise for me this year. I checked out a lot of animated films this year, just trying to diversify my cinematic diet. This one really hit me in the feels. I loved the animation. It was beautifully drawn or digitized, however they do it nowadays. And the voice acting was superb. I'm a huge fan of Lupita Nyong'o. She's great. I haven't seen a bad movie of hers. Well, if the movie's bad, she's always great in it. I saw this one, and really, this was a good year for her. She did this, and she also did A Quiet Place Day One. That one was a pretty good one. One of the better films I saw this year, for sure. One of the better ones to come out of Hollywood, most definitely. Number 5, I have to say Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. I was pleasantly surprised how well the film turned out. I say that not as a slight against Robert Eggers. You see, I love The Witch. I just didn't like the last 5 minutes. I thought the messaging was kind of weird. The Lighthouse was great. A bit odd, but that's okay. I love odd films. I have to be honest, I didn't finish The Northman, so I have to go back and finish it. But I was kind of afraid that Nosferatu was going to be a little bit like Witch, in that he was going to take a weird turn, and the movie was going to be about some weird self-empowerment about how it's good to be a vampire. And speaking as a vampire, yes, it's great to be who I am, but at the same time, I just feel like that trope is so outdone. It's been done to death. It's been done to undeath. It's good to get back to the basics, which Robert Eggers did. And as tired as I am of reboots and remakes, I have to say that for a remake, this Nosferatu is very good because it is true to the source material while also being its own thing. A lot of people didn't like the look of Count Orlok. I personally did. I really liked the whole fact that he kind of sort of looked like Vlad the Impaler. I digress. This movie isn't about those other two. But you have my top 5, but more specifically, the top 3 best films of 2024. Tell me, what did you think? I hope you saw those movies. If you haven't by now, I highly recommend them. Check them out. And let's see, since I gave you my 5 best movies, well, my top 3, how would you feel about me doing a top 5 of the worst films I saw in 2024? Be sure to comment below. If I get enough support on that, I think I might just do it just in time for January. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, Spooks and Spookcats. That's all the time I have right now, but be sure to subscribe to CountDrahoon Presents so that you can get notifications for my next video. And until then, as far as things go, when things go bump in the night, there are such things.
From ghoulies and ghosties.
From ghoulies and ghosties.
And long-leggedy beasties.
And
long-legged
long-legged
beasties.
and things that go bump in the night. Good Lord! Deliver us!